Hello and welcome. We're fast approaching the full moon of July, which is known as Ashala Puja. And I'll talk more about Ashala Puja tomorrow. But in the meantime, I'll continue with your comments and questions. Thank you for sending those in. Much appreciated. I've already mentioned this, but just to elaborate on it firstly, I'll repeat the question. What do you mean you worked part-time and not worked? So that was rather a perhaps remiss comment I made without explaining it further, so I shall now. I found by living on 8 precepts, that is when we continue with the 5 precepts of no killing, stealing, sexual misconduct, lying or taking of intoxicants, meaning by that refraining from all alcohol. And where I come from, my country, in the UK and many others in the West, drinking is quite a common social activity, but also very expensive. Refraining from that, firstly, you save a considerable amount of money. When you expand those precepts to the 8 precepts, you are celibate, so you are no longer involved in relationships. You don't eat any solid food or any food at all, anything that can be described or considered as food in the afternoon, that is. So at 12 o'clock, that's it, no more food until dawn the following day. We refrain from entertainment or engagement in any sort of social activities of that nature, singing, dancing, listening to music, socializing, and all self-adornments, perfumes, makeup, if you're perhaps that way inclined, fine clothes, jewelry, etc. So all of those things naturally lead to a much lower cost of living. So through my practice alone, living on 8 precepts, living in solitude, refraining from those things I've just mentioned, I had saved a considerable amount of money. I'd also renounced a lot of things I thought I needed and clearly didn't, like furniture, and brought my living down to what could be contained in a very small van parked on a beach somewhere in the south of England. So my outgoings had been reduced phenomenally. So I was working part-time as a result of that, freeing up most of my time for the practice of meditation. Also, requiring only to earn what was considered the sort of standard minimum wage or acceptable wage, rather than aspiring to high salaries and earning more and more, just accepting the bare minimum wages one could get to turn up, do your hours and leave with no responsibilities or considerations to be given afterwards. It can be manual work of any kind, it can be cleaning, it can be security work, it can be data input, anything of this nature that isn't usually considered that as an aspiring career, but enough to give you sufficient income to, if you have rent, pay the rent. And of course, I'd given that up, so I had no rent to pay, just the upkeep of this van to keep it on the road legally, and the bare necessities of life. I'd also chosen to, a long time prior to this, to be vegetarian, and in fact really vegan, because I wasn't using or eating any dairy products or eggs. And when you are not eating meat, cheese, eggs, fish, things like that, your grocery bill also is a fraction of what it used to be. They are the expensive items you get from the shops. So all of this meant that I could just do a job which was pretty well a job I didn't have to think, and I could really enjoy, and I didn't consider that by comparison to my previous life in business work. But we can apply that principle and that idea to our jobs and our work in many respects, but mainly when we can be satisfied to earn just enough to satisfy our needs and our and service our responsibilities, and not aspire to much more than that. So therefore have some contentment, which is something that does come about through this practice, and perhaps not very quickly for most. It may take quite some time of this practice, the practice being keeping precepts, practicing meditation and developing wisdom, living in accordance with the Noble Eightfold Path. Living this way, you can certainly start to reduce your necessary outgoings, and also reduce that desire for becoming something, for that aspiration, that it's thirst, it's craving, but what's the proper word? My mind's gone a little blank on this one now. But people aspire to progressing in their careers and getting promotions and advancing and earning more and more money and progressing up the ladder, getting promotions. And really this practice is about seeing all of that as rather nonsensical. If you've got what you need, then that is enough. Now that does take quite a lot of wisdom, appreciably. You have to develop a lot of understanding about the characteristics of existence. You have to really start to see really the true nature of the Four Noble Truths: suffering, the cause of suffering, the fact that there is an end of suffering when we can eliminate that cause, and the path leading to that end of suffering, this Noble Eightfold Path, living this life of Sila, Samadhi and Panya. When we start to really see that clearly, recognizing anicca, dukkha, anatta, impermanence, suffering and not self, these characteristics of existence, appreciating the nature of karma, that is all of our actions. All we do good will result in good things. What we do that's bad will result in bad things. Nothing more complicated than that. Then we start to develop right view that I talked about in the last talk. And with right view, we can see little sense in aspiring to, through great ambition, the higher levels of employment sitting on the board. Now, appreciably, I was self-employed most of my working life, but I really did enjoy, and never considered it work, the opportunity I had just to earn enough money to survive working for someone else. And it was a job that I enjoyed, so I didn't consider it work. If we do a job, if we do work that's perhaps working vocationally in the care industry, something like that, then we can too, also, even if we have to work long hours and very hard, gain great satisfaction from that work and therefore enjoy it. And we don't really consider it work by that understanding of the meaning of the word work. We actually find it a means to be able to do what we're our vocational inclination to work in a field that we want to help others, for instance. It enables us to do that. It pays us some money in order to satisfy our needs, basic needs, but it enables us to work with others and help others. So that can be another way of enjoying work. But we can also turn around jobs we don't like, but we have to do because we need a certain amount of money, by appreciating, turning any adversity to it, any animosity we might have toward the work itself, or maybe our employers or people we work with that we might not get on with so well, to seeing with compassion their own suffering, the people also in that line of work whom are with you employed because there is a need for whatever it is that you might be doing. Now, in the Noble Eightfold Path, we do have this thing called right livelihood, which is very important. So as long as our work falls within that category, right livelihood, so it's not in the arms industry, it's not directly you involved in selling or providing intoxicants, drugs or alcohol to people for their own self-destruction, it's not involved in people, well, that's a bit extreme, but let's say people trafficking or slavery or things like that, but it goes on. You know, anything of this immoral nature is perhaps work we should look at certainly changing from, because you'll never get happiness and gratification from such work ultimately, because it's breaking some precepts, but it's also not living in accordance with the Noble Eightfold Path. So that's how you do it. That's how you work, or I work part-time without it being work. I went to sit in a very beautiful place where I was technically on security, but just by being there, paid for my presence, because it was an insurance requirement of the organisation I was working for to have a place manned. I could work overnight, 12-hour shifts, and practice meditation, walking, sitting, just observing the breath, or walking up and down. It was a very lovely situation, a very quiet, peaceful setting. I really could not describe it as work, and I was paid a very good wage for doing so. Only minimum wage, but the amount of hours I was doing, even though it was just 3 shifts, 3 12-hour shifts, were almost as much as a full working week for some. But it really didn't occupy any useful time. It was at night, the place was empty, and it was very enjoyable. So I didn't consider it work. But we can always find enjoyment in whatever work we're duty bound to do. Do you have more videos on entertainment and art and such? No, I don't. Sorry, that's a bit of a rubbish answer, isn't it? But I don't think so. I don't really understand the question. On entertainment, we've just spoken of that. We refrain from entertainment where it's a distraction. I wouldn't consider art necessarily as entertainment. Sometimes art, you'll see art, beautiful art, present in Buddhist temples as a way of focusing the mind on a particular subject matter, which is why they have these Buddhist sort of friezes, Buddhist stories, Jataka tales, for instance, around the sort of tops of temple rooms, Dharma halls and such like. These are very beautiful and help to focus the mind and bring the mind into a tranquil and peaceful state. But I don't have any talks about the production of that art in the Theravada tradition, or this practicing tradition. Where I say practicing, it's focusing mainly not on intellectual study. It can be, if that's your choice, but in my case, on practice, meditation. You're curious about the robe colour. Does Sri Lanka monks wear that colour often? I'm a monk from Myanmar and we wear many different colours, red, saffron, purple. No, Sri Lanka monks don't. These robes were offered to me. I've spent a lot of time in Thailand, and this is the traditional colour of forest monks in Thailand. And it's derived from, no, you can't see it behind me, but round the corner there is a jackfruit tree. It has these big bulbous fruits hanging from it, which are jackfruits, which are a staple diet here. But the heartwood of that tree, so when a dead branch drops off, you can use the heartwood of that, is what we chop up small and boil in water to dye white cloth this colour in forest monasteries in Thailand. So that's where this colour comes from. Other colours come from similar natural ingredients in their countries of origin. And therefore that's why in some countries you might see purple maybe coming from some, I don't know, plant material, or very yellow coming from, say, saffron. But more usually these days, because of the cost of saffron, it would be something like turmeric in its place as a dye, but natural colours of this nature, if indeed that is the case at all. But very often these are mass-produced items, robes for sale and for offering to large sanghas, and they probably use some artificial dyes in their manufacture. Most robe colours in Sri Lanka are of this very bright, I call it day glow, but fluorescent orange, which is similar to the city or village monks of Thailand who wear an orange or saffron colour. That is usually actually coming about from the, not heartwood, but the outside wood of the same tree, jackfruit tree in Thailand, but provides a more saffron-like yellow colour. The red, the purple, I'm not sure where that comes from, but that colour is also quite common in Sri Lanka, as it is in Myanmar. But it's quite common to see many different colours and shades of that colour. You'll notice the colour of these robes varies considerably. It's always the same robes, but the longer I wear them, this set's now a year or so old. The last set was 2 years old, no, 3 years old. They go from quite dark brown to an almost orange eventually by fading, if we're not regularly dyeing them or washing them, cleaning them by dyeing them in that jackfruit wood solution, which is antibiotic and very cleansing and helps preserve them. But it's also quite an ordeal to get something unless you have an established dyeing shed in your monastery, which most forest monasteries do. It's quite difficult to get set up. I did, and there is a video on this channel about that, do that once when I arrived here, but it wasn't in a location where I could keep that going. And I haven't done it again because it does prompt rather a lot of ceremonial goings on. It's not seen so much here as a practical way of cleaning your robes and keeping them healthy and a good colour, but as a ceremony. And like all ceremonies, they all become becomes a lot of unnecessariness going on. But really what it is, it's a very practical activity. We're just washing and cleaning our robes, and that's how it should be. There shouldn't really be a ceremony involved. So I've avoided doing it because to ask or suggest that we set something up to do that seems to be translated as me suggesting we have this robe dyeing ceremony from time to time. Well, my ablutions are my ablutions. I don't think there's anything really to celebrate so much there. So they're fine as they are, and that's the only reason. The colour is not important at all. Can I apply Buddhism in my life while I still follow God? And you're scared that God might be mad because in the 10 Commandments and so on. Well, you know, Buddhism is a practice. It's sila, samadhi, panya. The panya bit, wisdom, is right view, as I talked about yesterday. And right view kind of counteracts the other view, which is that there's one God who is a creator, and that there's one God who's a creator who might be mad at you for any reason. And if that one God who's a creator is mad at you because you're keeping 5 precepts and because you're meditating, which is what the practice of Buddhism is, then I would question why believe there is such a God. Wouldn't it be better to believe, if there is a God at all, that he would also be infinitely compassionate to all beings? And if they're leading a moral life, keeping 5 precepts and just practicing meditation, would that God, out of compassion, be mad for any reason? I think not. But that is where the difference comes in right view. That's wisdom. We don't have to believe in a God or any amount of gods or external help. We're taught and given the tools by the Buddha in Buddhism, the Dharma, to help ourselves, and therefore by helping ourselves demonstrate to others by example how they also too can help themselves. So we too develop compassion, we too help others, but by example, not by preaching. We don't go to a book and quote verse after verse of things that need to be believed, instructions. You must believe this, you must accept this. No, we say, hey, why don't you try this out, see how it works for you? And if it does, great. If it doesn't, what have you lost? Nothing. And no one's going to be mad at anyone. Is reading Dharma books, listening to Dharma podcasts, or watching Buddhist educational videos entertainment? I think we've had this question recently. No, it's not. Is going to the gym beautification? Well, it's exercise, but if you're going there to make your muscles bigger for no purpose other than because you believe that that appearance makes you more attractive, and you stand in front of a mirror admiring yourself because of that, then that's kind of, yes, it is beautification. It's very much a belief in self and egotistical view, which is not right view, because we don't believe these 5 khandhas, this physical body, the feelings of this body, the recollection that our thinking brain can have of our experience, mental formations and sense consciousness are any more than a vehicle for chitta, a vehicle for the mind, chitta, not of this conditioned world, to use whilst in this existence. But whilst in this existence, through actions of that body, through speech, through its actions, and of that thinking brain, that mind, nama and rupa, so thinking brain and physical form, through its actions we can do good, we can do bad, and we can generate qualities within that mind, that chitta, generate good qualities, wholesome qualities, or we can generate negative or unwholesome qualities, bad qualities. And that will determine the momentum in which that, the direction in which that chitta is drawn, is propelled, is driven in, and therefore determine the outcome at the expiry of this physical body, as to whether it is still attached to this physical body. And by standing in the gym admiring your muscles, you probably are quite attached to this physical body. If someone was to change its appearance, you'd be very upset because you're attached to the way it looks. If you have let go of that attachment, then it rather doesn't matter. So the only reason you'd go to the gym is to keep fit. And this can be done just walking or running or swimming. I've never ever seen the point of a gym and for anything other than really practicing for a particular sport for gain physically, or through, you know, sporting challenges and such and so forth. So very much not in terms of right view, an activity that I consider in right view, but it's not breaking a precept. In terms of on keeping 8 precepts on these days, one should use the opportunity to be practicing, using it to, because you've freed up so much time for meditation, use it for meditation. You can listen to Dharma talks, read Dharma books, and the other things you mentioned there, the rest of the time, rather than reading books about other subjects or watching entertainment of a different nature. Use that in place of entertainment at other times when you're not keeping 8 precepts. Don't, because you're keeping 8 precepts, spend the time. I think because you mentioned you're on a retreat and everybody in their spare time went straight to the library to read Dharma books. Well, that isn't right view. I mean, that's not the point of a retreat. They may have Dharma books there, but it's not what they're there for. I mean, they're just there as a real fallback, or that is distracting from the object of the retreat, surely. So you should avoid doing that, yes. In a retreat situation, you should be using the maximum time that you've gained by keeping the 8 precepts for just additional meditation time. So, in your heart feels you have to follow Buddhism, but couldn't find any way how it's possible. Please reply or guide me if you have any information. So please just keep watching these talks, these videos, where I'm sharing with you the Dharma by way of its practical application to all of our daily lives, through my own experience living here as a monk, a monastic, an ordained bhikkhu, but also my previous life experience leading up to this in lay life, how it integrated and how I became to be doing what I'm doing now. That hopefully will give you some guidance and some help and some answers to many of the questions that might come up. But do some online research, stick to the well-known sources of information. It's not particularly Buddhist by nature, but Wikipedia has reliable information with regards to the basic aspects of Buddhism. If you search certain words like the Four Noble Truths, the Noble Eightfold Path, and then dukkha, anicca, dukkha, anatta even as individual words, it'll explain the characteristics of existence. This will give you a good basic understanding of Buddhism. And please, if you can, read the Dhammapada. A very good translation of that is available, as well as a chanting book which has the summaries of all of the the core teachings of the Buddha in the suttas in chanting form, which are good brief versions of those suttas, to get an understanding of the meaning of those suttas in the much larger compendium being the Tipitaka, the Vinaya Pitaka, the Sutta Pitaka and the Abhidharma, which is the full Buddhist text, which are perhaps too much to delve into at this stage if you're new to Buddhism. But certainly email me and I'll send you a link for the chanting book, for in English. I've only got English translations, I'm afraid, the Dhammapada, and they're a very good start to giving you practical information about Buddhism. So you couldn't find any way how it's possible. That's how it's possible. Keep watching this channel, email me, and I'll point you in the right direction. The email address, by the way, I can't include it in the comments because it gets too much spam, but it's in the, what do you call it? The channel description. Oh, here we go. This is the, I say he's an Australian fellow because he always starts, "Good day, Bante," and then "Thanks, mate. Could you speak about right speech?" So we have spoken about, no we haven't, but I have in the past. There's a whole talk on right speech. I think it's called that. I'm not very good at getting the titles right as far as being applicable to the content of the talk, because these talks are not organized in any way. They're not scripted, they're not edited. I sit here and just talk, generally. Your comments prompt me into various areas of subject. That doesn't mean that by that way they're not that useful, because if you keep listening even from now, you don't need to go all the way back to the beginning, then certain subjects come up time and time again. It's cyclical. So the answers to most questions get answered eventually. We come round to it again. But if you are really itching for something to distract yourself with and listen to, you can go back now a couple of years that I've been recording these talks, and there are many talks. But there is one about right speech, or how to speak nicely, or something like that. Just, I don't know how search even works, particularly on YouTube. Sometimes you can search for something and I come up. Sometimes you can search for something completely irrelevant, or something. You can search for, sometimes you can search for something that's not related to something I've talked about and I come up, and sometimes the reverse is true. So I don't know how it works, but whatever. Go through perhaps the video categories, and where it's in the main channel description page, there's some buttons, and I think you go into playlists, yes, and then all of the talks are categorized into questions and answers, into Dharma talks, into guided meditations, into chanting, and into monk's life and travel. So if you go to Dharma talks, and then you can sort them, and then in an order, go for most popular or most recent, something like that. So if you go to most popular, usually it's like a democratic choice, but the most popular are very often the ones that are the most useful. So perhaps start listening to those ones first, and then work down the list. It condenses them down to something. It's also easier to just glance through the titles and find one about right speech. But right speech in terms of the Noble Eightfold Path, well, in the precepts, the fourth precept is refrain from lying. And that is just that, refraining from telling anything that is untrue. But in right speech, it includes that. So it's refraining from lying, but also refraining from harmful speech of any kind, which includes divisive speech. That is sort of speech that sort of splits up either people or communities by, putting one person against another. In a way, gossiping, but that's really another category. It includes not speaking about others behind their backs, so speaking of others about them as if in a way that you wouldn't speak to them in front of them. So we should only speak about people when they're not there, in a way that we would speak about them when they're present and listening also. Therefore, you're only going to be speaking in a way that is fair, true, and useful. It's not because you're hiding anything back or keeping anything back. You should be honest still, but speak at the appropriate time. We have 5 points in terms of ways to speak nicely to people, and that's what this covers in the talk I have about this. We speak always in a timely fashion at the right sort of time. Make sure that the person's ready to listen. So for instance, if you wanted to come and tell me off, the worst time to do that would be just before I eat, because I haven't eaten for 24 hours, so I'm hungry. I'm wanting to get on with my meal. So I'm not going to be receptive to an admonishment, for instance. But after the meal is a very good time, because, oh, well, yeah, I've just eaten. Yeah, I'm sorry. So the right time. It has to be truthful, based on fact, truth, what you're saying to someone. It has to be spoken in a way that is kind, a nice way, a nice manner. It has to be useful to that person, and it has to come from a place of experience. In other words, practice what you preach. So no good telling somebody to do something if you are not able to do it yourself. You should always speak to people in a way that is coming from experience. Then it's based on real facts and truth and proof and evidence. This is how we go about admonishment, for instance, but other categories of way we speak to people that's a very good way of maintaining right speech, always keeping in mind those 5 points. It's not an official list, but it's a useful list. But the official list is divisive speech, harmful speech, gossipy, critical speech behind their backs kind of things. What's the other word? Aggressive speech, or I'm not sure. It's just 4 things. So truthful, not divisive, not gossip. I think you get the gist, get the general idea of right speech. That's about as much as I can expand upon it in this time, but there is a whole video on right speech, as I say, about it. Now, someone kindly is offering to make a shareable Google document for studying these lists and sharing the comments. Just an idea. And yes, it's a good idea, but we can't, unfortunately, there's a reason for it. We can't have links in the comments, particularly because they're restricted. If you put links in your comments, even accidentally, if you put a dot between 2 words, it makes it look like a link. YouTube hold that comment, and I don't see it. It doesn't get aired, so to speak, because if we have links in comments, when you're getting so many comments, then advertisers or people like that, perhaps other people, put all their links in the comments, and we'd have no room to be very difficult to find our own comments amongst them. So for that reason, the comment section is restricted. Links are restricted. But what I will say is the main reason is I try to keep it simple. These lists are not for study. I say, yeah, try and commit them to memory. I've only mentioned this one list, the 5 khandhas so far. I'll gladly send you those 5 words if you email me, anyone. But someone else has written the 5 words in the comments later on in these comments here, which are not the correct 5 words, are not the 5 khandhas. So there's always room for error, understandably, or different views. And really, it's my intention to try and share, as I understand, the contents of this information coming from the Sutta Pitaka, so the word of the Buddha, in the tradition that I've been trained in and understand, with you, by way of, yes, you can go and compare it yourselves with other philosophies, other religions, other traditions, but I don't do that here. I'm only talking about my own tradition. And the 5 khandhas, even within my own tradition, has different and varying explanations and translations, and maybe even in the main 5 words, different words are used. But I try to keep things down to simple one word. So Vedana, feelings, Sankhara, mental formations, that's 2 words, I know. Rupa, form, simple, one word in Pali, one word, and I only speak English in English. So I'll gladly send you the lists if I refer to them and you haven't written them down or you've forgotten them, in an email if you write to me. If you just say, please email me the 5 khandhas, please email me the Noble Eightfold Path, something like that, I can do that. I'm not going to start sharing documents or writing things on whiteboards or even blackboards. I have a blackboard, but it just says some pretty useless information, really. It's just there to hide a dirty old wall, really. But the point being, I'm not that kind of a monk. I'm not a lecturer. I don't want people to study anything. I want you to absorb and feel it. I want you to feel Rupa, feel Vedana. It is a feeling, it's feelings. Feel Sanya, recollection. Feel Sankara. And really feel Vijnana. In that case, then you know the 5 khandhas, the 5 aggregates. I don't want you to study each word in the Pali and make all the different translations and start going into lectural mode of study and sharing documents and getting into all of that field of, well, it's a can of worms you open. It's a rabbit hole of links, hyperlinks, going from one to the other to the other to the other, and discussion forums. I only ever look at the first line of comments, never the second. You can reply 100 times after a comment in a chain. I'm not going to go through all that because it would be impossible to manage. There would be far too many. There are quite a lot of comments anyway to just read and go through, which I enjoy. But if you reply to every comment that's then got a comment applied to it, then it goes on forever. And that's how it can expand and get into intellectualism and discussion and really sampapalapa, useless speech that's not useful. So I hope that I can include clearly in these talks and these explanations, these lists as we go on. I just tried to there with those 5 points of speech, for instance, timely, truthfully, kindly, usefully, and experientially. So 5 single words for 5 points to bear in mind when speaking to someone. And then you will always have right speech. Oh, and here we go. So there's the 5 aggregates of clinging. Form, yes. Feeling, yes. Prescription, no. Volitional formation, not really. Consciousness needs further explanation. It's sense consciousness. I know that's expanding it to 2 words, but in the translation of Vinaya can be translated as sense consciousness because it's applied to the consciousness as a result of form. It comes within the khandhas, it's part of forms. So it's not that which knows, it's not awareness in that sense. It's the consciousness of being conscious, of seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting, touching. That's bodily feelings, mental emotions. Consciousness of all that is Vinaya, is Vijnana rather. So it's not just consciousness. The other 2, it's form, feeling, recollection, and mental formation, which could, I suppose, be volitional formation. But we're talking about the thinking brain's formation of ideas from what it's receiving through its physical form. The thinking brain's activities. May I ask, do you truly have inner refuge within? Does your refuge in the triple gem truly lead to inner peace? So I take refuge in the Buddha, our teacher, out of respect of our teacher who has attained to the ultimate goal of parinibbana, but not as a god or someone we pray to or worship to help us, but out of respect for his teachings over 45 years, out of compassion, to leave us this Dharma, this Vinaya for monks and nuns, this Sutta Pitaka for all of us, his teachings, and for some, the Abhidharma, which comes later than the Buddha's life, but that is also a collection of information that comes from the Sutta Pitaka and from the teachings of the Buddha that some people find useful. So I take refuge in that, the Dharma, all of those teachings, the word of the Buddha, and all that it evokes all of the understanding it gives us, the wisdom it gives us, including this Noble Eightfold Path, this way of life. And the Sangha, whom I've ordained into, whom support me, and who I'm responsible to. But as lay people, we take refuge in the Sangha also out of respect for them having renounced worldly life to just solely practice and live in accordance with the instructions of the Buddha. So I take very much refuge, truly, in all of that, in that there is, as a result of taking refuge in that, a great feeling of contentment. And if that's what you mean by peace, yes, I'm very peaceful in that respect. I feel very peaceful because I feel so very content with the life that I'm living, which is purely as a result of having taken refuge in the Triple Gem. Someone just very kindly checking on my teeth, all fixed now. Thank you very much for any support you may have given towards that. And I can very happily say the work's been all finished, and I really truly didn't know how difficult a situation it was with my teeth previously, because I was struggling to eat properly, only eating very soft foods, and it made me a little bit picky, and eating itself was quite uncomfortable. But I'd got used to it over the years. It was only when the teeth were all fixed, now they're all fixed, I can munch into some sort of chewy leaves or chewy bread rolls or something like that and enjoy them just as much, and perhaps get a better diet. So your support very gratefully received, teeth all fixed, and hopefully will do me now for the rest of this life. So, you know, another tooth might go in the future. We expect that. They are impermanent like the rest of our bodies, but successfully repaired. Thank you very much. And more lessons learned about mindfulness and wisdom as well. Perhaps it would have been better to have got treatment sooner, but nevertheless I got the treatment in the end. Yeah, sorry I've gone quiet there, but I wasn't really sure what that question means, so I'll have to look at it again. Likewise. So how can we practice the Noble Eightfold Path every day? Yeah, by keeping the precepts, meditating, that's it. You'll develop wisdom naturally as a result of that. Just remember the Noble Eightfold Path. I'll give you this list again. The Noble Eightfold Path: right view, right intention, right speech, right action, right livelihood, right effort, right mindfulness, right concentration. That's the English words. That is the Noble Eightfold Path. But it's more easily just quickly summed up as sila, moral virtue, samadhi, meditation, panya, wisdom. Just apply that to all of your daily activities. When you're walking to the shops, queuing for the bus, when you're going to work, do you have right view about that? Do you have right view? It's a bit of a deep one, that. But if you've got time to think about it, contemplate it whilst you're waiting for the bus. Why are you waiting for the bus? It's to go to work. Why are you going to work? To earn money. Why are you earning money? To pay the bills. Why do you have to work for so long? So that I have extra money to go and spend in the pub and drink lots of beer or wine. There you can see, immediately something comes up that isn't in accordance with the Noble Eightfold Path. Well, if you didn't drink beer or wine and go to the pub, then you wouldn't have to work such long hours to earn so much money to afford to be able to do that. So you'd all of a sudden see what right view really is in terms of applying moral virtue through wisdom, which is the rest of the Noble Eightfold Path, with right action and right speech, right livelihood, is so important and so necessary for developing eventually through this practice contentment. So yeah, when you're working, is this job in accordance with what I was just talking about? Do I work in a slaughterhouse killing animals? Do I work in a do I have a business manufacturing alcohol for people? If you work in a business that manufactures alcohol for people, it's perhaps you're not directly giving it to them. Even to some extent, working in a pub, in a restaurant, it's arguably not right livelihood, but it's not wrong livelihood. It's their choice, and that may be your only option. But given another option, then you should choose the other option. But without another option, you have to maintain a living, don't you? But manufacturing yourself guns and selling guns to kill then is very much a no-no and a wrong livelihood in that respect. All of these things, the Noble Eightfold Path encompasses life every day. So we don't practice the Noble Eightfold Path all day in every life. Our life is either in accordance with or not in accordance with the Noble Eightfold Path in all of its aspects. So we just use it as a measuring rod, as a guide to what we're doing, and say, is this in accordance with the Noble Eightfold Path? And if we're unsure, go back to our list, go back to the internet or Wikipedia, or go back to these talks and just check it out, or send me a comment or send me an email and ask the question. And that way you know that you can live in accordance with the Noble Eightfold Path in all of your daily activities. So on that note, and until tomorrow, when we'll just talk a little bit more about Ashala Puja and the very much importance of that. Until next time, be happy and stay well. Sukhi Hotu.